Hi, welcome to this week's episode of What's What, where we're talking about market validation. What is market validation? So market validation is a series of interviews that you hold with your targeted market, right? So this is where you have to do it before you actually introduce your product so that you can actually create a better product for your target market. So say for example, Clifford wants to sell this plant. So a market validation will actually take up a minimum of 4 weeks. But then again, to get the ideal number of interviews going for you, it'll take maybe between 6 to 8 weeks itself. So practically the whole process will be 4 to 8 weeks. When you're doing this, you have to choose one primary objective. It's either 1, verify the target market, or 2, verify the positioning and value statement. It is not ideal to do both because this would actually create too many variables and weaken the value of the market validation itself. So the main thing that you have to do in market validation is actually identify your target market. So it's possible to do a market validation with multiple target markets, but that makes little sense. So narrow down the target market to 1 if you're testing positioning and 2 or 3 if you're actually testing the target market itself. So define as best as you can the target market. So write down the answers to the following questions. What's the type of companies do your potential clients work for? What's their job title? How will your product make their lives better? And how can you find them? So be sure to narrow down your target market and positioning before launching your market validation. So if you're testing a consumer product, you might want to do 100 over interviews. That would be best. But if you're actually testing a business-to-business product, you can often get a good market validation out of maybe 20 to 30 interviews itself. So pick the number of interviews that you want and multiply it by 3 to get the number of contacts you would need. So you can find people to interview in your target audience through a number of methods. So number 1 here is cold calling. Always position your questions as if you're seeking for advice. If you're trying to push and sell something to them, it most probably would not work. The next one is advertising. Nowadays, online advertising is easy where you can actually customize your target market itself, where you can identify exactly who you want to talk to. But of course, if you offer incentives, it will be a plus point. The next and final one is actually email. You can run email lists or use viral marketing to get to the right audience. Again, to get a higher rate of engagement, please do offer incentives for people who are interacting with your questionnaires or whatnot. The best way to get more information out of someone is actually to meet them personally, where some things and some questions that they might not be comfortable answering over a telephone or an email or a simple questionnaire. So that's where a face-to-face, more personal engagement would be best. But at the same time, a web survey is actually not recommended because the type of information that you need for your product would most probably not be suitable enough via objective answers. Unlike most questionnaires and stuff, when you're trying to sell a product, what you want to see is how emotionally relatable it is to them. So this is where you have to build the right question set for your target market. So to achieve this, you have to ask open-ended questions. The main questions that you should ask them is actually what keeps you up at night, because this is that one question that you would be able to gauge the priorities of your target market at this point in time. Beyond the basic question, you need to construct questions that allow you to try out your product positioning and target market. So a few example questions. Are you familiar with Clifford's tree? Use your positioning statement, then ask, do you see value in Clifford's tree for your organization? Or are you planning to invest in Clifford's tree this year? Maybe next year? Or who's responsible in your organization for implementing products or services in this space? So you might want to have questions that are specific to your product, including questions about their environment, their cultural issues, and as well as their budgeting, because this would actually help you gauge if they're in a position to actually want to buy your product itself. So the other thing that you have to think about is actually the time. So the more time you use would equal the focus and attention span of someone towards the product. The okay amount would be 15 minutes, but 20 to 30 minutes, if you can get someone's attention for 20 to 30 minutes, that would be the best. So it's also important to test the question set itself. So you got to run 3 to 5 test interviews, then review your questions and make sure that you're actually getting the results that you want. So the following are some things to consider during this review. So are the questions open-ended enough to start a dialogue? Is this the right target market? How long are the interviews taking? Are some questions unnecessary? Have you actually uncovered something in these interviews that you need to ask more detail about? Lastly, which questions were misunderstood and how can they be reworded? So, ideally, you should be the main person conducting the interview since you have the best knowledge of your interview itself. But it might not be possible, so what you do is you would actually have to be involved in the first few interviews and make sure that it actually works right.